joy and success. Every day is a chance for happiness. Yes, we can live a beautiful, crazy plan. Every day is a celebration. Every day is a celebration. Every day is a celebration. Welcome to the Great Song Adventure. I'm here with my co-host Paul Zolo.
Hi, Louise. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
I'm very happy we're here for part 2 of our Lou Adler interview. We had such a vast and voluminous, great interview with Lou Adler about his entire history, which is a lot. So we split it into 2 shows and got some good stuff coming up. He's talking about P.F. Sloan, our good friend, who worked with Steve Barry and wrote Secret Agent Man, and Lou was part of all that. And so we talk about that and some of the myths and the truth around P.F. Sloan. And it goes from there into Cheech and Chong, making their albums, and there's a lot of good stuff.
I love that he pulled out the Cheech and Chong vinyl and showed me a credit on there. There were so many people who played. George Harrison played on that session.
He got amazing musicians for Cheech and Chong, for Basketball Jones, for that one.
Basketball Jones, yeah. I said, my mother played on that session, and he said, you sung on it too. And now he showed me the credit to prove to me that I was actually there at A&M for that. Classic piece of music.
Do you remember what that was like?
Well, I remember I used to watch the cartoons. There would be cartoons, and there was a cartoon for that song. I don't specifically remember that session, but I do remember being at A&M a lot, and I remember going into those big sound stages a lot. They would pile tons of people in there and have big parties, and people would dress up like the 50s and have sock hops, and there'd be great music. And, of course, people played basketball in there because there were hoops.
Wow. You had an interesting childhood, you know that?
Yeah, I've been told.
Well, let's listen to some of your childhood, and let's listen to some more of Lou Adler. This is from part 2 of our interview with the great Lou Adler. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, we're talking about Johnny Rivers. He did Secret Agent Man, which was written also by P.F. Sloan.
And Steve.
Steve. Was that a song you had heard? Did you think that was going to be a hit?
No, that was a commercial. And there was only 30 seconds. It was written for the show, for a show in England that was coming over here. And then we decided, let's make it longer.
Yeah. It's a great record.
Yeah, it's a great record. And great guitar work on it.
Did P.F. Sloan play the guitar?
Yeah. Johnny played some, too.
And also, the Grassroots, now if I got this right, started as P.F. Sloan.
Yeah, this is total lies, so let's hear what
you should tell us the truth, because some of the story is that those were his demos that went out as the Grassroots, and then when they became famous, we got the 13th floor
that one's a
to
lie.
stand in.
Huh?
That they got the band the
I had
13th
gone
floor to be the Grassroots.
I went to San Francisco for whatever the reason is, and I saw a group, and on the way back, I was reading some magazine, and it had something about Grassroots in it. And having listened to them, I thought it would be a great name. So I asked them if that was okay with them, and they said yes. These guys from San Francisco, Joel Larson was the drummer, Bill Fulham, I believe, was the lead singer. We recorded 3 or 4 things. One of them was a Dylan song called Mr. Jones. You Don't Know What's Happening, Mr. Jones, I think is the whole title on it. Then they recorded not enough for an album, I don't think. At some point there, that group started to break up, and I left Dunhill with the Mamas and Papas. And Steve Barry and Phil at P.F. Sloan had this other group, and they took the name that was already there and made them the Grassroots. What happened with the demos, I don't know, because I wasn't there. But the stories that came from Flip, do you know him well?
I did, yes.
You know him as Flip?
No, we knew him as Phil.
Yeah, Phil.
He's no longer with us, sadly.
I know, yeah, I I have a lot of interesting things he wrote me right before that. Which is interesting stuff. And some songs, too. The leader of the Grassroots, he lies all the time about it.
Ah,
That's a real
so
story.
was it the 13th Floor that became the Grassroots? That was the band you used?
The which?
It was called the 13th Floor?
No,
That's
the 13th Floor was out of Texas.
okay, so that's not... that's not...
Yeah, no, I worked with a group called The Children, which was hung around with the 13th Floor elevators, I think they were talking. Was it? What's the story about the 13th
I
floor?
thought that the 13th Floor was the band that became the Grassroots, that you renamed.
Oh, I don't
them.
know.
No?
I
Okay.
don't know.
But the demos, they were never demos that you put out as the Grassroots. Phil said that his demos were the original Grassroots album. You know, the records were his demos.
He might have been talking about what happened after, with in between that period
Okay.
of time when we left, and they didn't have the Grassroots yet.
I see.
With the band that became the Grassroots. So
And I'm great you confirmed that he played the intro to California
he
Dreaming.
did play that.
I asked Michelle Phillips, and she said, I think so. You know,
Yeah.
but she couldn't remember.
No, he definitely played it.
That's important. That's a beautiful intro,
Yeah.
too. Did he invent that intro himself?
Pretty much, but anything that's played on the Mamas and Pop, John is involved in some one way or another, saying, yeah, go here, or stay there, or I like it or I don't like it. You know?
Yeah. I have a question, just in terms of now, music having changed so much and everything, just the way music comes out and the way people hear music. Do you hear anything that excites you, or do you hear any, do you come across any movements or genres that feel have potential that could be exciting for you?
I hear a lot, I hear a lot of music because of having 7 kids, and all boys that are one way or another, at least 6 of them that are involved in some way, on some level with music. So I hear a lot of music. The determining factor is always, not now, but 5 years from now or 10 years from now, what are the songs that remained and who are the writers that wrote those songs. It's hard to, you can hear a song now or you hear a writer and you say, I would say there's somebody that could really be someone or something, as opposed one song, he's a great songwriter. I'm not so sure about that until time tells.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I hear things. When I heard where Kanye had gone from that early rap to those productions, I thought there's a lot of talent there, both as a producer, and I couldn't figure out the writing yet, if it was great or what, because there are so many samples, and then the same thing with, unfortunately, who died, Avicii. When I heard some of the things that he did, I thought there was potential also, certainly as a producer, with those couple of hit records that he had, top 10 records he had. Coldplay, I really like that writer a lot, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I said, I hear a lot of things I don't care about. I wouldn't say I don't like, I just don't care about. But I hear things that I really like. I think it's out there, and I think we're through the remix time period that we were in for so long,
Mm-hmm.
and getting musicians in the studio. I think
Yeah.
that's starting to happen more, and that collaboration is what elevates material, and it's good things. It's transition, Digital is always going to bother me a little bit because of so many. The first time somebody said, "Don't worry about it. There's 100 extra tracks." And I think, how am I going to fill them? I'm down to 6 tracks, and that's all I need.
Yeah.
So there's things to get around. I hear from a lot of people that they like the analog sound more than the digital sound, as I do. I think it's much warmer. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's good, you know.
It's interesting you said that about all the options, and if you're using Pro Tools, you started making great records, like you were saying, in mono. Has that changed? Did it affect your production, and did it give you better, options of production, or did you have to be?
I think at some point when it went to 16 track, I was really happy with it, especially working with the Mamas and Papas, because I could spread those vocals. I didn't have to go to F or whatever it was. When it went beyond that, I didn't care too much. When it went to 32, and that was still analog. When it went to digital, and it was infinity, I was on my way out at that point. So I didn't do much recording in digital. It also took something away. I recall the first time that normally I would say, "Let me hear the guitar. Could you add this? Could you add this?" Or, when they start telling me, "Here's the guitar, and this is what I'm adding," I said, "You don't need me." And I was on my way out at that. When the guitar players started having all that stuff around, I said, it wasn't as much fun for me.
Too many choices. Well, it sounds like the way you think, because you were talking about writers, you think, what's it going to be in 5 years? Is this going to last in 5 years? And you've always been a visionary person. You've always been someone who's looked at something and looked at the potential of where it can go, which is a really special and rare trait, because I find mostly people want to see what's proven, and it's.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right, and
yeah.
if I and I think that way, I don't express it, but this maybe not say this guy's a great songwriter. Maybe he wrote a great song. Might be closer to what I might say. It all changed some. I have when one of my sons was 15, he did a remix that had 2 million hits on iCloud, and never did another one. Didn't want. That's a different kind of artist, different kind of. It's not the same as a, what do they call them, one record or one failure, or those
One-hit wonder?
One-hit wonders. It's not the same thing. It's choosing not to do more and being able to do something that could spread that much and have people listen to and not really be that involved emotionally. It's almost like a game. And I can do that. I'll mix that, put it up on iCloud.
And see
So
what it is.
yeah, there's a little bit of both, but it's not to say that they're not out there. I mean, there are talented people and talented writers out there. I hear things that if I were pushed, I'd express. I think that's a songwriter. That's a guy or a girl that's gonna write a lot of songs.
That understanding that a great song is something that lasts, besides just being, an immediate hit. As you know, in the business, so many people that took over the record companies weren't musicians. Did you find that kind of changed the business and the kind of music that's coming out of the music business? You're a music maker,
Okay.
and you're a producer, and you were running the record company.
Yeah.
But as you know, most people that are running record companies in later years didn't make music in any ways. They were
They're
more
lawyers
about
at
the
some
business.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did that change the business?
Well, that changed dramatically. I think the music business changed and it must have been in the 80s, the heads of labels became more important than the artists that were on those labels. And they, in a lot of ways, I mean, people were talking about them like they were superstars. The head of Sony, whatever Yankovic, whatever his name was. He became a superstar, and a lot of them were not music makers. They were. Some of them had really good ears. Clive had a good ear. He became a music maker. I guess he produces records now. But basically, they were thinking of above and below the line from somebody, whereas me, as a invested in my artists, no matter what they did, once I invested in them, I didn't care about the above and below line. Whatever it took to get the best product out of them. If it meant scrapping something that we already did, I didn't have budgets for albums. Some albums cost, look at Tapestry cost $26,000. That's because Carol and I recorded that way, thought that way, not because we had somebody telling us you have to be under a certain amount. If that album would have cost 50, 75, we would have kept going. We had it at that point and didn't have to do it. That was a difference in the 80s where they start putting down budget and tell you have to record this many days, this many hours, etc. And also what it did, it cut out a lot of catalog artists at that point because record one or two things, they didn't hit, you're off the label, as opposed to riding with that artist.
Yeah.
I have an artist, I'm about to do a gospel album with Mary Clayton, who I thought was a major star.
Yeah.
And we did 3-4 albums that none of them were successful.
And you're doing a
I would have
gospel
done
record
it-
now.
Huh?
You're doing a gospel record now with her?
Getting people that know gospel music to do it with her.
That's so exciting.
Yeah. She had a really bad accident. She lost both her legs.
I remember
Yeah.
hearing that years ago.
Yeah. It's been about 3 years, I think.
How's she doing?
She's starting to get it back where she's singing beautifully, and it's the right time for her to do something. And we're thinking that it's right for her to go back to her gospel roots and do something like that. But I would have stayed with her for 10 albums.
Sure.
It didn't matter. I believed in her as an artist. That changed in the 80s. They got more cost conscious, and because they didn't have that kind of musical emotional relationship with the artist, but it became I think she can make hits. She didn't make hits, get her off the label. That kind of thing.
But when you were producing albums, you weren't thinking ever in terms of hit singles, or certain ones would be singles?
Not really.
Yeah.
I was thinking of, because I never recorded one song with an artist or two songs. I always went for an album. And within those recordings, even with Carol, I didn't know what the single was when I finished.
Yeah.
I mean, my favorite song on the album is So Far Away. I thought, and I tested, I asked a few people, I think it was Jerry Moss, who was the head of A&M, one of the heads of A&M, that said, I think it's too late, is the single. And that was one of the ones in consideration. And I went with that.
Consumer testing is asking your friends, right? It's like, what do you think?
Exactly. Yeah.
It seemed like any song on that album could have been a single. I mean, every one was that strong.
Truth.
Yes?
I only had trouble with one song on that album, where it should fit in the sequence. What do you think?
Oh, God.
Smackwater Jack?
Huh?
Smackwater Jack?
No, that because of where it fell in the sequence, it was perfect.
Tapestry?
No, Where You Lead.
Oh.
Yeah. And Where You Lead was a different, if you listen to it, it's more towards another type of recording. It's not lyrically, but it's a little bit a
Poppier?
different kind of pop.
Yeah.
And so where it fit, I think it was the fifth song on the second side.
It was the Gilmore Girls theme written, 40 years too early.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
But
you made it.
but I recorded it. I recorded them as an album, and then chose singles from those. You know.
So many of those songs, they're like standards.
Yeah, looking on California Dreamin', I put out "Go Where You Want to Go" was the first single,
Oh,
and it was out about 6 weeks. And I was listening to California Dreamin', and I was like, "No, this is it." So I pulled it off the market and put out California Dreamin'.
wow, I didn't realize that because that's such a great single, one of
Yeah.
the best ever.
So this is something interesting here in terms of labels. Now I'm talking to Lou as the label. That whole thing of the way Motown used to be, where labels would be, a community, a staple of writers and musicians, and, everybody worked on each other's things, and that would really nurture a sound, and it would also nurture success, and it made all the artists on the label grow, and when they'd grow, they'd write better songs and make better records. And this is something that doesn't exist a lot of. We don't have a lot of this anymore. I mean, I think it is cropping up now as a reaction to Spotify and YouTube, and indie labels are growing like that. But this seems to be a way that
Yeah, I mean that's more of it.
artists
If you
grow.
look back to the Ode, Motown, there's a couple in the East like that. They're more in Los Angeles. They were people that were involved with music and artists in one way or another that started labels. That was pretty much eaten up. And out of Philadelphia, the same thing.
Tom Bell.
That was eaten up by, what are we? We're down to 4 big record companies and distributors. That changed it drastically as they started eating up those companies. When I basically sold Ode to Sony, I didn't last very long. I mean, it's when I saw the difference in how artists, I knew the difference, but I actually saw it, so I became a party to it, and it wasn't right. It didn't feel right.
After the fact, you were surprised at how it felt? Did you not?
Yeah, the amount and you need that in big business, and it's understandable. But the amount of people that were touching records and the marketing of records based on data, based on a lot of things that were different from the heart and the soul of where those Berry Gordy came from, and there's a few of those, maybe more than that. That's when it became a business. And if you look at the kinds of sales at that time, you see why it became a business. Those numbers, they became so grand that you couldn't keep those people out of the record business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were just, and that happened years and years ago. I recall when I think it was called Dot Records. It was owned by a guy by the name of Randy Wood, and this would have been in 1957 or 8, something like that. And he used to keep the numbers secret of how many he was selling, and or everyone did that had a little record company at that time, and some for the wrong reasons, like there were those little, I'm really going off, black labels that just wanted to give their artists a car and some clothes as opposed to a good royalty. And Randy Wood comes along and he gives out gold records and says that a gold record sells 1 million records. Well, the business changed that time. People said, you can sell 1 million records and make that kind of money? So it starts to change. It takes quite a while, but in the 80s it became a money business, not a song business at that point.
Brands, the word brand was never in my vocabulary, and then it became a thing in the 80s.
Yeah.
And so if something is so huge, like Michael Jackson, it wasn't considered even worthwhile at all, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So given that the way the music, and it's changed a lot since the 80s, are you optimistic about the state of popular music? Do you think songs will continue to matter and good songs will continue to be written?
It never enters my mind. I mean, I'm not involved except through my boys. I don't think it'll ever stop being not about a song. What changes what they call a song. You know? So all those tracks that they said were hit, that was about tracks. It's all like Adele. I mean, that's about songs. You know, that's about songwriting and song. So it'll never go away. I mean, there were periods of time where it did. It'll always be. And so in that sense, I'm optimistic because I still love, a good song, a great song, but not involved.
And even way in the past, there were always really cool records of sometimes not great songs.
If I hear
right?
something, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And live is the place where you still, when things happen live, there's an investment in it that's not the same as when you just dial something up that you're streaming. It starts to feel like something is really happening when you're at a live show.
And it is, yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting.
When you were growing up as a kid, I understood you went to journalism school. You weren't planning to be a musician.
I what?
If I got it right.
I wanted to be a journalist, actually. The only thing I thought about was being a journalist. Yeah.
In what way? To write for newspapers? Is that what you wanted to do? To be a newspaper writer? How were you envisioning
I
your
was.
career?
I wrote high school sports for a daily that's no longer Herald Express, I think was the name of it. So I wrote at high school sports for a while I was in high school. I took drama. I took those kinds of art. We didn't have, where I grew up, which was not a very, it's a poor area. We didn't have a lot of liberal arts. And there was a woman named Sadie Hurwitz, who, crazy, who gathered together at her house anybody that liked acting, music, writing, any of those things. And she didn't do it in conjunction with the school. She just you go to her house and she'd teach you those things or listen to what you had or what you thought. And that was really my education, my early education in it. And through that I found somebody that was a piano player, and we wrote a couple of songs. And I took them, I don't think I took those songs around. I just wrote songs, and I wrote a couple of school songs. I changed the lyrics on a couple of songs. And until I met Herb Alpert and decided to be a songwriter, we decided to write some songs.
That's where it started. You were a songwriter first before you were ever a producer, yes?
Never thought about producing.
Oh.
There was a Cashbox story in 1959, I think it was, that named Herb and I, Lieber and Stoller, and Nevins and Kirshner as independent producers. And that's the first time that the industry was really aware that there was an independent producer.
Mm.
Yeah. We just sort of fell into it. We started out doing demos of our songs that we wrote. Herbie would sing them. And we went from there, and I sort of worked in the studio. Then we got a job as A&R man, apprentice A&R man at Keene Records, what Sam Cooke was, that the label Sam was on.
Yeah.
So having started off with 12 songs on Tapestry at A&M Studios, and starting with the approach of the demos and doing minimal overdubs. How did you feel standing on stage at British Summertime and seeing all those people more than 50 years later completely engrossed?
All of those things, anything that happens like that, where Cheech and Chong, 40 years later, anything that has endured, and especially Tapestry, is so important to people. The people that love Tapestry have a real love for that as a body of work, not as a couple of songs but as an album. And it's a tremendous feeling, And the reason that I started to feel it is every time there was a new mode of listening, Tapestry sales went up, which meant when their vinyl wore out and they went to CD, they bought it. When it went to the next and next and next, they kept buying it. So you get the feeling of how much it meant to people. And I think maybe Carol, it might have been the first time that she realized, seeing 65, 70,000 people or whatever it was at Hyde Park, and the response and the generations. There were a lot of, not everyone looked like me. There was generations of people there. It's a tremendous feeling to work on something and with somebody. You almost can't explain it, but it's such an important part of your life. It's enduring and forever. She's forever with me. So,
Well, I'm sure she'll be happy to hear that and say the same.
Oh, she knows it. Sure.
Yeah. Well, it's a great thing to be reminded that when you're writing songs and when you're making records, that everything does matter. You may not know it in that moment, but what you do does matter. And
how about the cover of Tapestry?
Yeah.
That's an important part. That made her a different person than all the covers that were out like that in '69 or something. This was just a woman who was telling her story and was very content sitting in that window making a tapestry with her cat sitting there.
Yeah.
And that was such an important album, and one of the first albums by a songwriter being the performer, which changed songwriting.
We were lucky in that period. There was James Taylor, Joni Mitchell, and Carol, and all recording at A&M at one time at some point. And certainly Joni was always there when Carol was there. It was musically historical with those people, and they all endured. Joni's works. James is still out there on the road, filling the Hollywood Bowl 2 or 3 nights, as Carol did recently.
And the sound, the production of Tapestry, that sound, it influenced so many albums. It was a songwriter album where the songs were first. I was always wondering how you came upon that, where the drums were there, but they weren't in the way. It was kind of different than rock and roll.
It originated with her demos. She put them out not too long ago. If you go back and listen to them, you can and with the demos, and it's true that I was working for a publisher at that time, Alden Music, which was Donnie Gershwin. And I opened the West Coast office of Alden Music. And so they would send me their demos. Then I would take it to artists and A&R men in Southern California. And I couldn't get the demos back. Once Snuff Garrett, for example, who did Bobby V and Jimmy McDaniels and on, I'd say, Snuff, if you're not going to use it, give me the... No, because they loved hearing Carol on those demos so much. So it was, when I started to think about the Tapestry album, I thought that's the way to do it. Make a record, not a demo, but stay as close to that sound as you can, And you can go back and listen, and they're all doing something so interesting, but never, she's up front, right, and playing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking this time. It's great
Pleasure.
to get to talk to you about all these great albums.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when I did the Hyde Park show, and it was fortunate that I was asked to open.
Yeah, how about that?
That was amazing, and I got to put together this A-team band. But at the last minute, my mother said, "And I want you, Louise, to play a solo on Smackwater Jack." And I was like, "You want me to do this? You want me to play after Danny Korchmar and Dylan Condor?" And the whole time that I was on stage, all I could think of was that solo, and until I played that solo, I wasn't going to rest. And then I played the solo with Robbie McIntosh and the Wings, you couldn't ask for more pressure, and walked off the stage, and you just whispered in my ear, "Nice solo." I like that. That was a nice moment. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lou.
Yeah, pleasure. Let me see if I can find that album and show you your credit.
Okay.
That was our interview, part 2 with the great Lou Adler. What a nice time spent with him, and he was off finding your credit on the Cheech and Chong album.
He found it. It was great. Now I'm going to have to go on eBay to find the vinyl of the record so I can keep my credit nearby. That was fun. It was really enjoyable, and it was so warm to sit there with him.
Yeah, well, you guys knew each other for a long time and were part of that beautiful Hyde Park concert, so I'm glad you talked about that.
That was a big moment for both of us, definitely. Well, we have a lot to look forward to. We have a lot of new episodes, and our next episode is going to be with Chris Difford of Squeeze.
That's great. Then you go all the way to England and talk to Chris Difford?
That's right, I did. I went all the way to England to talk to Chris Difford. Actually, he has a songwriting retreat, and I was fortunate to be there this last year and found some time to talk to him.
I'm so glad. I love Squeeze, and I love that the Great Song Adventure is all over the globe, finding the great songwriters. That's what we're doing. So I look forward to that. And if you're out there and you want to connect with us, you can find us on all the social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. And, if you want to ask us questions or suggestions, please let us know. If you've got criticism, don't be brutal, but please share it.
Yeah, we're sensitive.
Yeah, very sensitive.
Sensitive songwriters. Well, we also have a Great Song Adventure Spotify playlist where we have songs from our guests, and it's getting to be a bigger playlist as we get more guests. So please join us there.
And thank you for listening, and tune in next time to the Great Song Adventure.